When my parents divorced, I was left as useless baggage on Gran's doorstep. By 4 each morning, she dragged me out to feed pigs, split wood, and scrub the drafty house. My hands were raw with chilblains and thick calluses. Dad, living comfortably in the city, kept promising to bring me over, but Gran locked me in my room like a lunatic. Buried in textbooks, I swore, the day I got into university, I'd leave and never look back. But on the day I planned to run to Dad's, my phone buzzed with a strange email, dated exactly 1 year ahead. The attached video showed me, a year later, sobbing at Gran's fresh grave. I stared, scowling at my reflection. What are you crying for? The old hag's gone. Pop champagne, don't weep. The girl on screen slapped herself, screaming, voice cracking. Idiot. That loving dad? He remarried years ago, new wife, precious son. He wants you in the city to sell you to an old creep for a $20,000 dowry. She gasped. The grandmother you hated? She spent freezing nights digging through trash heaps, scraping pennies for your tuition. But the day you were to register for uni, she was shoved while stopping them from dragging you away. Hit her head. Never woke up. Future me stared, eyes swollen, choking back sobs. Don't trust him. If you get a second chance, save Gran. Give her the life she deserves. I stood in the dim stairwell of my father's apartment building, my heart hammering against my ribs. I was skeptical. My dad called me every month, his voice always dripping with affection. Could he really be planning to sell me? With trembling fingers, I dialed his number. The line clicked open. Sylvia, sweetheart, his voice was warm, almost too sweet. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad, I'm almost at your place. I wanted to come see you. He let out a delighted chuckle. That's wonderful. I'll head out right now and buy all your favorite foods. Hurry on up, okay? I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It was all a mistake. The email was just a sick, twisted joke. But then, through the thin apartment door, a muffled voice drifted into the hallway. Is that the daughter you were talking about? A man's gruff voice asked. Sounds like a sweet thing. If we get this settled, the $20,000 is yours. Every single penny. My blood turned to ice. Then came my father's frantic whisper. Keep your voice down. Just make sure you have the cash ready. Once she walks through that door, she isn't escaping. I took a sharp step back, my boots squeaking against the concrete. Panic tore through me. I turned and sprinted down the stairs like a hunted animal. When I finally burst out of the building, my stomach violently rebelled. I leaned against a rusted lamppost, dry heaving until my throat burned. The raw, desperate screams from that future video echoed in my ears, louder than the city traffic. He was going to sell me. My own father was going to trade my life to secure a future for his new wife and son. With shaking legs, I boarded the overnight bus back to our rural town. Tears silently tracked down my face, freezing in the midnight air. It was 3 a.m. when I pushed open the creaking wooden gate of our yard. Gran's house was dark, save for the single dim bulb hanging in the main room. I crept inside, my footsteps silent on the packed dirt floor. Gran was crouching by the well. The water was near freezing, and her hands were swollen, raw, and bleeding in places as she scrubbed a pile of salvaged scrap metal. She stopped every few seconds to cough, a deep, rattling sound that shook her frail frame. The scene hit me like a physical blow. The video, the cold numbers on a scrap paper, her tragic end, it was all real. A choked sob escaped my throat. Gran whirled around, her eyes wide. When she saw me, her expression instantly hardened into a scowl. She grabbed a dirty broom resting against the well, pointing it at me like a weapon. You miserable brat, she barked, though her voice cracked. Where the hell have you been? Trying to sneak off to that deadbeat father of yours again? She raised the broom high, but as her eyes swept over my tear-streaked face and blue lips, her hand froze. She lowered the broom, clicking her tongue in annoyance. Get inside, you useless thing, she muttered, turning back to the well. There's a cold sweet potato in the pot. Eat it and get back to your books. I didn't move toward the kitchen. Instead, I threw my arms around her bent, bony shoulders, burying my face in her rough, dirt-stained coat. Gran went completely rigid. Gran, I'm sorry, I wept, my tears soaking into the worn fabric. I'm not leaving. I'll never try to find him again. I'm going to study, I'm going to get into a great university. I squeezed her tighter, feeling the sharp outline of her ribs. Once I make it, I'm going to take you away from here. I'm going to give you a wonderful life. Gran's hands remained suspended in the air for a long moment. Finally, she let out a rough sigh and gave my back a clumsy, trembling pat. Stop talking nonsense, she mumbled, her voice surprisingly thick. If you don't pass those exams, I'll break your legs. Her words were harsh, but her touch was incredibly gentle. For the rest of the spring semester, I became a ghost in my own house, living only for my textbooks. I studied until my eyes burned and my fingers cramped. Gran still scolded me daily, complaining that I was too slow with my chores. But every night I fell asleep at my desk, I would wake up with her heavy wool coat draped over my shoulders. And every morning, a soft-boiled egg and a tube of cheap ointment for my cracked hands would be waiting next to my books. We lived in a silent truce, bound by an unvoiced understanding. Then, on a humid afternoon in April, Richard showed up. He brought 2 flashy boxes of cheap vitamins, and behind him stood his new wife, Vivian. She held a silk handkerchief over her nose, her eyes filled with disgust as she surveyed our crumbling yard. Richard spotted me scrubbing clothes by the tub. He immediately put on a warm, paternal smile and marched over. "Sylvia, look at you," he said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Your skin and bones. What's the point of a girl studying so hard anyway? I found a wonderful family for you in the city. The husband is a wealthy businessman. You'll be living in luxury. We can finally be a real family again." Looking at his eager, greedy eyes, a wave of intense nausea hit me. This businessman was the old creep who bought girls for $20,000. I wrung out a wet shirt, keeping my voice cold and flat. "No, thank you. I want to take my exams first." Richard's smile faltered, but before he could snap, Vivian chimed in with a sharp sneer. "Oh, please. You really think you're university material? Your father is trying to save you from a lifetime of shoveling dirt. Even if you manage to get into some low-rate college, how do you expect to pay for it? We certainly aren't funding your little dream. We don't have money to waste on a useless girl. Be smart and pack your bags." The back door slammed open. "Keep your filthy mouth shut," Gran roared. She charged out of the house, wielding a broom covered in chicken coop grime. Without a second thought, she swung it directly at Richard and Vivian. "Get out. Get the hell off my property. My granddaughter's education is none of your business, you parasitic bastards." Richard tried to duck, but the dirty bristles swiped across his expensive trousers, leaving a streak of filth. He went red, pointing a finger at Gran's face. "You crazy old hag. Watch your step. I'm her legal father, and what I say goes." Gran let out a harsh, mocking laugh. "Her father? You drove her poor mother to her grave, and now you want to sell her daughter? You miserable piece of trash. As long as I have breath in my lungs, you won't touch a hair on her head." She swung the broom again, striking Richard's arm. Vivian shrieked, ducking behind him. "Keep acting tough, you old corpse," Vivian yelled, her voice screeching across the yard. "Richard hasn't sent you a single dollar of child support in 5 years. You think you can put her through college on the pennies you make selling trash? You're delusional." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. 5 years without a single dollar? I stared at Gran in absolute shock. Gran didn't look at me. Instead, she grabbed one of the vitamin boxes they had brought and threw it directly at Vivian's head. "Get out. Get out before I get the pitchfork." Richard scrambled backward, shielding his wife as they retreated to their car. Before slamming the door, he rolled down the window, his eyes dark with malice. "Fine. Let's see how long you can feed her. When she's starving, you'll come crawling to me on your knees." The car sped off, kicking up a cloud of red dust. The yard fell into a heavy silence. Gran dropped the broom, her chest heaving as she leaned heavily against the wooden doorframe. I walked over and gently touched her arm. "Gran, is it true? He hasn't paid anything in 5 years?" She violently shook my hand off, her face twisting in anger. "That's grown-up business. Get back to your room and study. If you don't get into university, I'll throw you out myself." She turned and limped inside, her back more hunched than ever. That night, after her breathing turned slow and heavy, I quietly crept into her room and opened the bottom drawer of her wooden cabinet. There was no bankbook. Only a bundle of crumpled paper scraps and torn cigarette boxes, covered in crooked pencil marks. June 6th, sold scrap metal for $2.50. July 10th, Sylvia's practice exams, $30. October 5th, the pigs are growing well. There is hope for Sylvia's tuition. The very last entry, dated yesterday, Sylvia is looking too thin. Go to the market tomorrow and buy half a pound of beef. My tears fell silently, wetting the rough paper. She was killing herself to build a bridge for my future, just like the video had said. That was why she stayed up until dawn. That was why she never touched the eggs she prepared for me. Every single penny she scraped together was meant for my escape. I gripped the paper scraps tightly. I swore I would rewrite our story. I would make Richard pay, and I would give Gran the life she deserved. In June, just 3 days before the state exams, a massive storm hit the valley. The temperature plummeted, and I came down with a vicious fever of 103 degrees, shivering violently under my thin blankets. Gran stood over my bed, grumbling angrily. "Of all the times to get sick. You really are a curse on my life. I must have done something terrible to deserve you." She slammed the door and went out into the pouring rain. I lay there, my joints aching, drifting in and out of consciousness. Hours later, I felt a damp presence by my bed. I opened my eyes. Gran was standing there, soaked to the skin, her clothes plastered with yellow mud. In her hands, she held a chipped ceramic bowl. Steam rose from a fresh bowl of chicken noodle soup, with a beautifully fried egg hidden beneath the surface. "Eat this," she ordered, her voice hoarse. "And take these." She set the bowl down and pulled out 2 boxes of fever medicine from her coat. They were wrapped in 3 layers of plastic bags, completely dry. My throat tightened. The nearest pharmacy was in the town 5 miles away. This frail old woman had walked 10 miles through a torrential storm, risking her life on the muddy mountain roads, just to fetch me medicine. Gran. I whispered, my voice cracked. Shut up and eat, she snapped, turning away quickly. But I could see her shoulders trembling. The medicine broke my fever by morning. 3 days later, I walked into the exam hall with a clear head. When the results came out, the entire county was in an uproar. I had scored in the top 5 of the state, securing the top spot in our district. Admissions officers from prestigious universities called our neighbor's phone throughout the night. Gran did something she had never done before. She bought several rolls of firecrackers and set them off in the yard, filling the air with smoke and noise. She stood at the gate, handing out cheap candies to anyone who walked by. My girl did it. She beamed, her chest puffed out with pride. She's going to the big city. She's going to be someone. But the joy was short-lived. The following afternoon, our wooden gate was kicked off its hinges. Richard marched into the yard, followed by 3 burly men. Well, aren't you a clever little bitch, Sylvia, he sneered, his eyes scanning the yard. Mr. Henderson saw the news. He said since you're the top scorer, he'll raise the dowry to $50,000. That's enough to buy a nice apartment in the city for your brother Toby. He waved his hand to the men. Find her acceptance letter. Without that piece of paper, she can't register anyway. The men lunged toward the house, tossing chairs and tearing down shelves. Stop it. You thieves. Gran screamed, charging at them with a wooden cane. One of the thugs grunted in pain as she struck his leg. He whirled around and slapped her across the face with brutal force. Gran hit the floor, her lips split and bleeding. But even as she fell, her arms wrapped tightly around her chest. I noticed a bulge beneath her shirt. She had tucked my university acceptance letter inside her inner vest, keeping it safe against her skin. Hand it over, you old corpse. Richard yelled, stepping forward and grabbing Gran by her gray hair. Gran groaned, her eyes shut tight in pain. Vivian stood by the gate, holding her nose. Richard, why are you wasting your breath on this old lunatic? Just grab the girl and let's go. Toby is waiting at home for his new toys. Richard nodded, releasing Gran's hair and stepping toward me. Gran tried to crawl forward to grab his ankle, but she was too weak. I didn't think. I sprinted into the kitchen, grabbed the heavy meat cleaver from the counter, and lunged back into the yard. Get the hell back. I screamed, holding the heavy blade with both hands, pointing it straight at Richard's chest. My vision was red. I was shaking, but my grip on the handle was ironclad. Touch my grandmother again, and I swear to God I will get you right here. My voice carried a raw, murderous conviction that stopped the men in their tracks. Richard froze, his face going pale as he took 2 steps back. You dare point a knife at your own father? Try me. I snarled, stepping forward. I would rather go to prison for murder than let you sell me. Get your dogs out of our yard right now, or I'll start swinging. The thugs exchanged uneasy glances. None of them wanted to risk getting hacked by a desperate teenager. Richard spat on the ground, trying to salvage his pride. Fine. You want to play tough? Let's see how long you can protect this old hag. They scrambled back to their cars and sped away, leaving the yard in ruins. I dropped the cleaver, my knees giving out as I collapsed next to Gran, sobbing hysterically. Gran pulled me against her chest, her thin arms shaking as she held me close. It was the first time she had ever embraced me so tightly. Don't cry, Sylvia, she whispered, her voice cracking. Gran is here. Even if it kills me, I'll get you out of these mountains. Hearing my name from her lips for the first time, a strange sense of peace washed over my terror. I held her tight, and with my free hand, I pulled out my phone. I compiled the video from the future along with audio recordings of Richard's threats and photos of Gran's injuries, and sent them directly to the regional police and child protection services. It was time to end this. The monsters were going to pay. By late August, our backyard pig pen was empty. Gran had sold the 2 fat pigs we had raised all year. That evening, she sat on the edge of her creaking bed, a rusty needle in her hand, sewing beneath the dim bulb. Spread out on the blanket was a pile of crumpled small bills and a few crisp hundreds. It's $1,200, she murmured, folding the bills neatly and wrapping them in a piece of red cloth. Then, she took my old undershirt and began stitching the cloth pouch securely into the inner lining. When you're in the city, don't go flashing your money, she said without looking up, her voice thick. Buy decent food. Wear what the city girls wear. Don't let them look down on you because of where you come from. I sat beside her, staring at her calloused, scarred hands. Gran, once I get settled and find a part-time job, I'll bring you to the city to live with me. She snorted, clicking her tongue. Who wants to live in the city? Go on your own. Once you're gone, I'll finally get some peace and quiet. She was as stubborn as ever. But as she pulled the thread tight, I saw a single tear fall onto the red cloth, darkening the fabric. The next morning, we left before dawn to catch the long-distance bus to the provincial capital. If we could just get on that bus, we would be free. It was 3:30 in the morning when we quietly slipped out of the yard. But as we reached the dirt road at the town entrance, 3 vans suddenly lurched out of the darkness, blocking our path. The doors slid open, and a dozen heavy-set men stepped out. Richard stood at the front, and beside him, Vivian was waving my official registry documents with a triumphant smirk. Running away? Richard sneered. Did you really think getting into college meant you won, Sylvia? I used your legal documents to officially withdraw your registration at the university. You're not enrolled anymore. You have nowhere to go but to Mr. Henderson. With those few words, he shattered everything. The late nights, the frozen hands, the miles Gran had walked in the storm, all of it, wiped out by a stroke of a pen. Pure, unadulterated hatred flared in my chest. You're insane. This is kidnapping. It's illegal. Kidnapping? Richard laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. A father arranging a marriage for his daughter? Even the sheriff won't touch this. Grab her. 2 men stepped toward me. Don't you dare touch my girl. Gran screamed. She dropped her worn canvas bag and hurled her frail body at the first man, her teeth sinking deep into his arm. Ah! The old bitch bit me, the man roared, violently throwing his arm back. Gran was flung to the ground, but she scrambled right back up, throwing herself in front of me. Sylvia, run. Run to the highway. Richard's face twisted with rage. Get this old pest out of my way. Now. One of the thugs raised a heavy boot and kicked Gran squarely in the chest. A sickening thud echoed through the silent morning. Gran was thrown backward, her head striking a sharp, jagged rock on the side of the road. Blood, thick and dark, immediately pooled in the dirt. The sight of that crimson stain seared itself into my brain. Gran lay motionless in the mud, her eyes turning to me with a faint, fading light. Her lips moved slightly, making no sound, but I knew what she was saying. Run. No. No. Please, God, no. A choked, animalistic shriek tore from my throat. I fell to my knees, scrambling through the dirt to reach her. I pressed both hands against her head, trying to stop the blood, but it kept seeping through my fingers, warm and sticky. The horrific vision from the future had caught up to us. I gathered her rapidly cooling body into my arms, my world collapsing into absolute darkness. Gran. Please. Gran. The metallic tang of blood filled the cool, damp morning air. Gran. I screamed, my voice cracking into a raw, ragged sob. The crimson pool beneath her head widened with terrifying speed, soaking into the dark, hungry mountain soil. I pressed my palms hard against her temple, but the warm, sticky fluid seeped through my fingers, dripping onto my wrists. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, erratic hitches. Her eyes, usually so fierce and sharp, had gone glassy, staring blankly up at the gray morning sky. Oh, look at that, Vivian murmured from the safety of the van, her hands still fluttering near her collar. The old bag finally broke. Richard, we need to leave. If she dies here, it's going to be a headache. Richard stood frozen for a fraction of a second, his boots spattered with mud. But his panic quickly morphed into a cold, transactional calculation. He looked at me, kneeling in the dirt, helpless and covered in my grandmother's blood. Get the girl, Richard hissed to the 2 burly men beside him. The old woman's done for anyway. We load Sylvia into the van, get to Mr. Henderson's estate in the next county, and let him handle the paperwork. Once we have the cash, we're out of this province. The 2 thugs stepped forward, their heavy boots squelching in the mud. One of them reached down, his thick, calloused fingers wrapping around my upper arm. Like an iron vice. He yanked me upward, tearing me away from Gran's limp body. No. Let me go. Gran. I thrashed, kicking wildly, my nails digging into the man's forearm until I drew blood. He grunted, striking me across the face. The blow sent a sharp, ringing pain through my ears, and my mouth filled with the taste of copper. Brat, he muttered, raising his hand to strike me again. Then, a sudden, blinding flash of high-beam headlights cut through the heavy morning mist, accompanied by the deafening, mechanical wail of sirens. 2 blue and white police cruisers and an ambulance roared down the narrow dirt road, kicking up wild sprays of gravel and mud. They skidded to a halt, completely trapping Richard's 3 vans between the steep mountain slope and the deep ravine. Police. Nobody move. Put your hands on your heads, a booming voice commanded. Through a megaphone. Richard's face drained of color. His jaw dropped, his eyes darting frantically toward the woods, but several officers were already sprinting out of the vehicles, guns drawn, their flashlights cutting through the dim morning air. The thug holding me hesitated, and in that split second of distraction, I sank my teeth deep into his thumb. He shrieked, releasing his grip, and I collapsed back into the mud beside Gran. Sylvia. A young woman in a dark trench coat scrambled out from the front passenger seat of the first police cruiser. It was Officer Chen, the young detective from the Regional Child Protection Unit whom I had contacted weeks ago. Behind her came the medics, carrying a stretcher and medical bags. Over here. Please, she's bleeding from the head. She's not breathing right. I screamed, my voice cracking as I huddled over Gran's body, trying to shield her from the cold rain that had begun to fall. The medics pushed past me, immediately falling to their knees. One of them pressed 2 fingers to Gran's neck while the other began wrapping her head in thick bandages, barking orders for oxygen and an 4-line. Is she going to make it? Please tell me she's going to make it, I begged, my hands shaking so violently I could barely speak. We have a pulse, but it's weak. Severe head trauma. We need to get her to the provincial hospital immediately, the medic said, lifting Gran onto the stretcher. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, a loud scuffle broke out by the vans. What is the meaning of this? Richard bellowed, his voice cracking with artificial outrage as an officer shoved him against the hood of the van, pulling his arms behind his back. I am her father. I have the legal right to take my daughter. This is a family matter. Save it for the station, Richard, Officer Chen said, her face grim as she stepped forward, holding up a printout of the email and the digital audio files. I had forwarded to her department. We've been tracking your financial accounts for the last 48 hours. We have the wire transfer records from Henderson's Shell Company, and we have your daughter's recorded statement. Under Article 240 of the Penal Code, you are under arrest for child trafficking, conspiracy, and aggravated assault. This is a setup. That little bitch lied to you. Vivian shrieked as a female officer forced her hands into steel cuffs. She's a lunatic. Just like her grandmother. Shut up, the officer snapped, pushing Vivian into the back of a cruiser. Officer Chen walked over to me, her boots sinking into the blood-stained mud. She looked down at my shivering frame, my clothes soaked with rain and dirt. She took off her dry trench coat and draped it over my shoulders. You did well, Sylvia, Chen said softly. You kept your head. Now, get in the ambulance. Your grandmother needs you. I looked back at the muddy road, at the dark stain where Gran had fallen, and then at Richard, who was glaring at me through the police car window with venomous, hateful eyes. You haven't won yet, Richard, I thought, my jaw tightening as the anger burned away the last of my fear. I will make sure you never walk free again. The provincial hospital smelled of bleach, cheap floor wax, and slow death. I sat on a hard plastic chair in the hallway outside the intensive care unit, still wearing my mud-caked boots and Officer Chen's coat. My hands were clean. Now, I had scrubbed the dried blood off my skin in the sink of the public restroom until my flesh was raw, but I could still feel the warmth of it clinging to my fingers like a curse. A doctor in blue scrubs finally emerged from the double doors. He looked exhausted, his eyes bloodshot behind thin wire-rimmed glasses. Are you the patient's granddaughter? He asked, looking down at a clipboard. Yes. How is she? I stood up so fast my head spun. She survived the surgery, but she's in a deep coma, the doctor said, his tone flat and clinical. The impact caused a subdural hematoma. We cleared the blood clot, but because of her age and her history of chronic lung damage, likely from years of breathing dust and heavy physical labor, her body is under extreme stress. She's on a ventilator. The next 72 hours will tell us if she has the strength to wake up. My stomach sank. What about the cost? I have some money, her savings. The emergency surgery and ICU stay are already running into thousands, the doctor interrupted, glancing at my ragged clothes. And if she requires long-term rehabilitative care, it will be much more. You need to speak with the billing department downstairs to settle the deposit. He gave me a brief, pitying nod and walked away. I slumped back onto the chair, burying my face in my hands. $1,200. That was all the money Gran had managed to scrape together by selling the pigs and digging through trash heaps for years. It wouldn't even cover the first night in the ICU. Sylvia. I looked up. Officer Chen was walking down the hallway, carrying a paper cup of hot tea and a thin yellow folder. She handed me the tea, which I took with trembling hands. The local police in your town just executed a search warrant on Richard's apartment in the city, Chen said, sitting beside me. They found $5,000 in cash, the advance payment from Mr. Henderson. They also found your official school registration documents in a locked safe. My heart leaped. My registration? Can I still go to university? Chen's expression darkened. That's the difficult part. Your father didn't just take the documents. He bribed an administrator at the District Education Bureau, a man named Director Zhang, to officially register you as withdrawn due to personal health reasons. Because Richard is still listed as your legal guardian. On your household registry, the university's automated system processed the withdrawal. The enrollment slot has already been reallocated to another student on the waiting list. A cold, hollow feeling settled deep in my chest. All of it. The late nights under the dim bulb, the raw skin on my fingers, the 10 miles Gran had walked through a freezing storm to buy me fever medicine. It had all been erased by a bribe and a signature. Is there no way to reverse it? I whispered, my voice trembling. I scored the highest in the district. They know who I am. Normally, no. The bureau is incredibly bureaucratic, and once an enrollment is closed, it's closed, Chen said, her eyes shining with a quiet, fierce anger. But Zhang didn't do this out of the goodness of his heart. We have evidence of a bank transfer from Richard's account to Zhang's brother-in-law. I'm building a case, Sylvia. But it takes time. Time we don't have if you want to register. Before the semester starts next week. I stared at the steam rising from the tea. In the future timeline, the one from the video, I had been weak. I had run away. To my father, believed his sweet lies, and allowed myself to be trapped until it was too late. But this time, I had a weapon. I had the knowledge of what they were capable of, and I had the fury of a girl who had nothing left to lose. Officer Chen, I said, my voice steadying. Do you know a reporter named Ma Wei? From the provincial daily news? Chen blinked, surprised. Yes. He's a senior investigative journalist. He's done a few pieces on rural corruption. Why? Contact him, I said, looking her straight in the eyes. Tell him the top scorer of the district exam is sitting in a hospital corridor while her grandmother lies in a coma, because a corrupt city official took a bribe from a child trafficker to steal her future. Chen stared at me for a long moment. A slow, grim smile touched the corners of her mouth. I'll make the call, she said. The internet has a short memory, but it possesses an insatiable appetite for outrage. By the next evening, a 3-minute video interview had been uploaded to the provincial daily news social media accounts. In it, I sat in the dim hallway of the hospital, my face pale, my hair unwashed. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I simply showed the camera my raw, calloused hands, the photos of Gran's cracked fingers, and the crooked pencil marks on the scraps of cigarette boxes she had used to track every single penny she saved for my tuition. And then, I played the audio recording. Keep your voice down. Just make sure you have the cash ready. Once she walks through that door, she isn't escaping. The contrast was brutal, a brilliant, hard-working girl from the deepest mountains, who had overcome every obstacle to score in the top 5 of the state, pitted against a greedy, parasitic father who had sold her like cattle to buy an apartment for his spoiled son. Within 6 hours, the video had over 10 million views. The hashtag #SaveSylvia trended at the top of every national platform. The public reaction was a tidal wave of fury. How can a father do this? He's a monster. He should be locked up for life. Who is this Director Zhang? How can an official withdraw a student's enrollment without her even being there? And who is this Mr. Henderson who thinks he can buy a human being for $50,000? By midnight, the Provincial Department of Education was forced to issue an emergency statement. They announced an immediate investigation into Director Zhang and the local registration office. By noon the following day, Director Zhang was suspended, and 2 state investigators were sent to the district office to audit all registration changes from the past month. But the real battle was just beginning. Sylvia, you have a visitor, a nurse whispered, tapping my shoulder as I sat by Gran's bedside, holding her cold, limp hand. I walked out into the corridor to find a tall, elegant middle-aged man in a tailored gray suit waiting for me. He carried a leather briefcase, his expression smooth and professional. Sylvia. I am Mr. Vance, legal counsel for the Henderson Group, the man said, offering a card which I did not take. He sighed, slipping it back into his pocket. I understand this is a highly emotional time for you. But I believe we can find a mutually beneficial resolution to this misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I scoffed, my voice flat. Your client tried to buy me for $50,000. Mr. Henderson is a wealthy, respectable philanthropist, Vance said, his voice dropping to a low, persuasive hum. He merely agreed to help your father with a financial loan, with the understanding that you would come to work at his estate as a private tutor and companion for his young daughter. There was no sale. The audio recording you released is circumstantial. In court, we can easily tie it up in appeals for the next 5 years. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a document. However, Mr. Henderson wishes to avoid any further negative publicity. He is prepared to offer you a settlement of $100,000. In cash. This will cover your grandmother's medical bills, your entire university tuition, and leave you with a very comfortable nest egg. In exchange, you will sign this non-disclosure agreement and issue a public statement clarifying that the video was a misunderstanding caused by a family dispute. $100,000. To a girl from the mountains who had lived on cold sweet potatoes and salvaged scrap metal, it was an unimaginable fortune. It was enough to buy a small apartment in the city, to hire the best private doctors for Gran, to ensure we never had to worry about food or shelter again. Vance watched me, a faint, arrogant smirk playing on his lips. He thought he knew my price. He thought everyone had one. I looked at the document, then up at his smug, expensive face. My grandmother almost died because of your respectable philanthropist, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet vibrating with an icy intensity that made his smirk falter. She is lying in that room with a tube down her throat. Because his money made my father think he was untouchable. I took the document from his hand. Before he could smile, I ripped it in half. Then in quarters, and tossed the pieces at his polished leather shoes. Tell Mr. Henderson to keep his money, I said. He's going to need it to pay for his defense. Because I'm not stopping until he's sitting in a prison cell right next to my father. Vance's face darkened, his professional veneer cracking. You are making a very foolish mistake, girl. You have no power here. The media will move on in a week. And you will be left with nothing. Then we'll see who lasts longer, I said, turning my back on him and walking back into the ICU. The wheel of justice, though often slow, grinded with terrifying force when pushed by public outrage and relentless evidence. 3 days after Vance's visit, the provincial police department upgraded the charges against Richard and Vivian from simple child custody disputes to organized human trafficking and bribery. Officer Chen's team had done their work thoroughly. They raided Henderson's estate and uncovered a systematic network of marriages arranged through local brokers in poor rural counties. Henderson wasn't just buying me, he had bought 3 other young girls over the past decade under the guise of domestic employment. 2 of them had vanished from the province entirely. The scandal was too massive for even Henderson's wealth to suppress. His business partners scrambled to distance themselves, his stock plummeted, and within a week, the provincial prosecutor issued an arrest warrant for Henderson himself. As for Richard, his desperation turned him into a pathetic, sniveling coward. From his holding cell, he begged to see me. Officer Chen accompanied me to the visitor's room, where Richard sat behind a scratched plexiglass window, wearing a standard orange detention vest. He looked 10 years older, his hair disheveled, his face gray and sunken. Sylvia, sweetheart, he whimpered, pressing his hands against the glass. You have to help me. Tell the police it was all Vivian's idea. She was the one who complained about the money. She wanted the apartment for Toby. I only did it because I wanted you to have a better life in the city. A better life? I looked at him, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no hatred, just a deep, profound disgust. You wanted to sell me to a man who has ruined the lives of countless young girls. You let your thugs beat the woman who raised me when you abandoned me. You are a parasite, Richard. I am your father, he screamed, his face contorting with sudden rage, slamming his fists against the glass. You wouldn't even exist without me. You owe me your life. If you don't drop these charges, I'm going to prison for 20 years. What about Toby? He's your brother. He needs a father. Toby has the mother he deserves, I said quietly, standing up from the chair. And as for me, my mother died because of you, and my father died the day he left me on Gran's doorstep. The only family I have is the woman lying in that hospital bed. You ungrateful bitch. Richard roared, his face turning purple as 2 guards stepped forward to restrain him. I should have strangled you the day you were born. You're a curse. A curse. I turned my back on his screams, walking out of the visiting room without looking back. The trial took place in late October. Thanks to the mountain of digital evidence, the testimony of the other victims, and the public scrutiny, there was no room for legal maneuvers. Richard was sentenced to 15 years in a high-security prison for human trafficking and bribery, with his assets entirely seized to pay for restitution. Vivian received 8 years as an accomplice. Mr. Henderson, despite his high-priced lawyers, was sentenced to 22 years for organized trafficking and statutory abuse. His corporation was dismantled, and his estate was liquidated under court order. But my victory felt hollow as I walked back into the quiet hospital room where Gran still lay, her face pale, the steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor the only sound in the room. The leaves of the plane trees along the city streets had turned a deep Brilliant gold by the time the university registration office finally resolved my status. The Ministry of Education had conducted a thorough audit, firing Director Zhang and 3 other complicit officials. My enrollment slot was not only reinstated, but the university, embarrassed by the scandal, offered me a full 4-year academic scholarship, complete with free housing and a monthly living stipend. Sylvia, you need to go to the capital, Officer Chen told me one afternoon as we sat in the hospital courtyard. The semester started 2 weeks ago. The university is holding your spot, but you can't delay any longer. You've worked your entire life for this. I can't leave her, I said, looking up at the 4th floor window of the ICU. What if she wakes up and I'm not here? She'll think I abandoned her. She'll think I'm just like him. She won't, Chen said gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. We've arranged for the restitution money from Richard's seized assets to cover her private room and a full-time nurse. I'll check on her every single day. She stayed alive so you could leave these mountains, Sylvia. Don't make her sacrifice meaningless. I closed my eyes, the cold mountain wind biting at my cheeks. If you don't pass those exams, I'll break your legs. Her harsh, grumbling voice echoed in my mind, but this time, it brought a small, sad smile to my lips. She was right. She had fought too hard for me to waste my life sitting in a hospital corridor. The next morning, I packed my small canvas bag. I didn't have much, just my textbooks, a few change of clothes, and the little red cloth pouch containing the $1,200 Gran had sewn into my undershirt. I had carefully cut it out, but I kept the red cloth wrapped around her crooked pencil notes. Before leaving for the train station, I went to her room. The nurse was adjusting her 4-drip. I sat by her side, taking her hand. It was still rough, the calluses firm and dry, but the raw cuts had finally healed under the hospital's care. Gran, I whispered, leaning close to her ear. I'm going now. I'm going to the big city, to the university. I'm going to study hard, just like you wanted. I squeezed her fingers. You have to wake up. Do you hear me? I'm going to buy a house with a big yard, where we don't have to carry water or split wood. I'm going to buy you the best beef in the city every single day. So don't you dare give up. There was no answer. Only the steady, monotonous beep of the machine. I stood up, wiped a single stray tear from my cheek, and walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind me. 4 years passed like a blur of library lights, thick textbooks, and the relentless hum of the city. I studied law, specializing in child protection and public interest litigation. I worked 3 part-time jobs, not because I needed the money, my scholarship covered everything, but because I wanted to build a foundation. I wanted to be strong enough so that no one could ever threaten our lives again. Every month, I took the overnight train back to the provincial capital to visit Gran. She had been moved to a quiet, private care facility on the outskirts of the city, funded entirely by the restitution fund. She was no longer on a ventilator, but she remained in a vegetative state, her breathing quiet, her eyes closed to the world. The doctors told me she might never wake up. They said her brain had suffered too much oxygen deprivation during those critical minutes on the muddy road. But I never stopped talking to her. I told her about my classes, about the cases I was helping with, about the noisy, crowded streets of the city. On the day of my graduation, the sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. I stood on the university stage, wearing my black academic gown and mortarboard, receiving my degree as the valedictorian of the law school. The applause of thousands of students and parents washed over me, but my heart felt quiet, anchored to a small room hundreds of miles away. After the ceremony, I didn't join the graduation parties. I took the first train back to the province, still wearing my graduation gown under my coat. It was evening when I walked into Gran's room. The room was warm, filled with the faint scent of fresh lilies I had ordered for her table. A nurse was sitting by the window, knitting, but she stood up with a warm smile when she saw me. Congratulations, counselor, she said softly, noticing the red and gold diploma tube in my hand. I'll leave you two alone. Thank you, Nurse Lin, I said. I walked over to the bed and sat down. I took off my heavy graduation cap and set it on her bedside table, right next to the small, worn red cloth pouch that I carried with me everywhere. Gran, I said, my voice thick with emotion as I took her hand. I did it. I graduated today. I got the top spot in the entire university. I gently placed her dry, calloused fingers over the smooth leather of my diploma. I signed my contract with a major public interest firm in the city yesterday. They're giving me an apartment. It has a small balcony with plenty of sunlight. I've already arranged for your transfer. Next week, we're leaving this place together. I leaned my head against her shoulder, just like I had done on that cold night by the well 4 years ago. I kept my promise, Gran. You don't have to fight anymore. I can protect us. Now. The room fell into a deep, peaceful silence. And then, I felt it. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I looked up at her face. Gran's eyelids fluttered. Slowly, with agonizing effort, her pale, wrinkled eyelids parted, revealing her eyes. They were no longer glassy or blank. They were clear, dark, and filled with that familiar, stubborn light. She looked at me, her gaze moving from my tear-streaked face to the black graduation gown, and finally to the red and gold diploma in her hand. Her lips trembled, dry and cracked. She tried to speak, but only a faint, hoarse whisper came out. Stupid girl. She murmured, her voice incredibly weak, yet carrying that same, beautiful scold that had saved my life. Why, are you crying? A choked sob escaped my throat, but this time, it was filled with absolute, overwhelming joy. I leaned down, wrapping my arms tightly around her frail, bony shoulders, burying my face in her hair. Because we won, Gran, I wept, holding her close as her trembling, weak fingers slowly rose to pat my back. We finally won.